Texas Week with Rick Casey is made possible by the generous support of the William and Salome Scanlon Foundation, supporting educational, environmental, and Hispanic cultural initiatives. The John and Florence Newman Foundation, encouraging an informed community. The Daniel J. Sullivan Family Foundation, and visionaries like members of KLRN.
I'm Rick Casey, and this is Texas Week. The May 9th election is about more than electing a mayor and council. Major amendments are being proposed to the city charter, including a large pay raise for council members and the mayor. We'll review all the proposed changes and have something of a debate on council pay. Evan Smith, editor-in-chief of the Texas Tribune, joins me to discuss the various rifts between the Texas House and the Texas Senate. And in my last word, I'll discuss class warfare between those two bodies. Texas Week starts now.
This week's most important stories, people, and issues in depth. This is Texas Week with Rick Casey.
It seems you can't go a day in San Antonio without a mayoral debate. By the time people go to the polls, they should know enough to cast an intelligent vote. But there's more to the May 9th election than a selection of the mayor and council members. There are some important proposed amendments to the city's charter. Probably most important is a proposal to pay our elected officials well more than the $20 a week they now get, plus a $3,000 bonus for the mayor. Joining me are Greg Brockhouse, former chief of staff to Councilman Ray Saldana and a city council candidate in 2013, and president and CEO of Amegy Bank and the former board chairman of the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce, David McGee. Welcome to you both. Let's take a quick tour of other non-candidate issues that are on the ballot. First, there are two propositions, each for the use of 1/8 of a cent city sales tax. They've already been in effect. One of them is mainly to buy land over the recharge zone, just buying the non-development rights, like the old land bank. And it's been going on for over a decade. It seems to be pretty popular. Have you heard anything, David, in opposition? Anybody organizing in opposition to that one?
I haven't heard of any opposition to those because they've been going on for a while and it's working pretty well.
They seem pretty popular.
Yeah.
No, and I agree, and I think there's been a pretty solid track record of success. So the voters, it's going to be hard to go against water and parks in our community, and as long as it's been success and the projects are run well, I think you're going to see those pass handily.
The other one is another 1/8 of a cent for linear parks. Continue building more linear parks, and again, those seem to be pretty popular. Any negative organization on that?
We need more parks.
Okay. Then the charter amendments, and the first one is flows out of something, Greg, that you were very much involved in, and that was the effort to kill the proposed streetcar project that VIA had done. You helped gather a lot of signatures, and out of that petition process came an effort to, and the council agreed to put on the ballot a proposal that would require a vote of the people before any city streets were used for any light rail or streetcar project. I haven't seen any organizing either way on it. You're feeling just that this proposition is going to be so powerful you don't need any organization on that?
Well, we will be doing some things. We launched a website, sachartervote.com, talks about streetcar and council pay. And it's going to give more information, and we'll be doing some different things out in the community that are going to help with awareness. I don't know if we're going to get into mailers and those kinds of things. It gets really, it turns into a lot of money. And we've spent most of the time trying to gather those 28,000 signatures, and most of our time and efforts are spent on that. And we think the public would be hard-pressed to vote down the opportunity to have a vote in the future on projects that are hundreds of millions of dollars that are just kind of flying through the city machinery. So I think the community wants the right to vote. It wasn't so much about streetcars, it was just about the opportunity to walk in a booth and make a decision on where your tax dollars are going. So I think that's going to pass and pass handily. And
even though the city attorney said technically you didn't have enough signatures, the council had the political wisdom to say if there's that many people who want to vote, we're going to give them a vote.
Well, again, it's funny you said that. We worked with the city on that case, and I think that was a piece of kind of citizen activism, stepping up and making things happen in our community. We worked with the city attorney, Robbie, and his team to find the right language to put it on the ballot at the right time. We could have pursued legal action on that to force the vote in November, but we chose not to. Wasn't good for our community.
And I haven't seen any opposition to that.
The Express News did put something out there about, but that was
an editorial.
Right, that was it.
David, you were on the commission that came up with the charter propositions. And one of them has to do with how we replace how we fill a vacancy when a mayor runs off to Washington or something like that.
Right, right.
Or a council member has to leave for whatever reason, like to run for office in Austin, which we've seen both of those things happen. Help us understand, the proposal, it had been that if any vacancy occurred after with less than 9 months left, then the council would vote for replacement. And in the case of a mayor, that replacement had to be a member of city council.
Right.
If I understand now, it's 4 months instead of 9 months that says we have to have an election. If there's anything more than 4 months left, then rather than 9 months, we have to have an election. And that the council does pick the replacement leading up to the election, and if it's less than 4 months. But when they're picking a mayor, they don't have to limit themselves to who's on the council. Why make those changes?
Well, I think, first of all, I'm not sure that everybody in San Antonio understands what the rules really are today, and a lot of those rules were set to mimic what was handed down to us from state statutes. But I think the last year we saw quite a bit of change and turnover, and I think we had somewhere around 7 different representatives at City Hall changed hands, and none of us had an opportunity to vote on them. And so I think the thought is that we should shorten the amount of time left in a remaining term before we call a special election. In other words, to elevate the voters' rights, to give them more of a voice in what's happening down at City Hall.
Also, there was a conscious choice also to not limit a mayoral selection to members of the council. Was that partly because, obviously they were looking around to see who was least likely to run for mayor in case any of the others did, and they very well may have chosen somebody who wasn't on council to fill that seat? I
think the thought of the commission, and then later affirmed by City Council, was that there's a lot of talented people in San Antonio that are capable to be leaders, and we need to have the best leaders in San Antonio running our city. This is a very complex city. We need a lot of great, diverse leadership. We need to open the door to where people who really know what's going on in San Antonio can provide that leadership. And so that was our thought.
Okay, Greg, do you have any thoughts on that, or have you seen any opposition to those
No,
changes?
I think that anytime you put the decision-making in the hands of the voters, you're doing what's absolutely right. And if you narrow that gap on that time frame and say it's 4 months, that's perfect. I think people were really disappointed with the turnover in the city council, and it affects the continuity of policy. And quite frankly, it turns that appointment into a pretty heavy political sledgehammer come re-election time with the power of the incumbency. So it makes a lot of sense, and I hope it passes. It's the right thing for our community.
Okay, well, let's talk about what you both came here really to talk about, and that's council pay. You not only were on the commission that came up with the idea to significantly increase council pay, but you're now heading up a group raising money to actually run a campaign in favor of it. Why don't you, in a nutshell, tell us why you think $20 a week isn't enough, and $4,040 a year for the mayor?
Well, let's get the facts out to begin with. It's really not $20 a week. That may have been part of their thinking, but the fact is that under the city charter, and anybody can go and look at it on page 16, section 6 of the city charter, it's a very simple provision that talks about council compensation and mayor compensation. Each city council member is given $20 a meeting with a cap of $1,040 a year.
Right.
The mayor gets an additional,
which happens to be 52.
That's right, but let's get it the way it's actually written.
Right.
It's $20 per meeting,
right,
for a total of $1,040 per year. And the mayor gets a generous additional stipend of $3,000. So her total, or his total compensation in a year would be $4,040. The way that number came about was they presumed that there would be one meeting a week that they would attend, and they'd get paid $20. Times 52 is $1,040. So that is the current pay that they get.
And not too long ago, you thought this was perfectly peachy keen.
Me personally?
Yes.
I did, actually. And the truth is, though, I wasn't aware of what the number was. Even though I'd grown up here in San Antonio, I thought for sure they got $25,000 or $30,000 a year to have to live off of. And when I found out what the number really was, I couldn't believe it.
Okay, so but you were converted, and if I understand, it was because as chamber chairman, you found yourself working more with council members.
When I realized that every one of them were putting in 40, 50, 60 hours a week, meeting with their constituencies, neighborhood association meetings, working with people on both sides of the issue, whether I agreed with their position or not, it was totally evident to me that they were putting in more than a full-time job. So how could they possibly be supporting their family or supporting even themselves if they're single, have another job and be putting in 50, 60 hours a week? It's not possible.
And what the commission called for is the average, for the council members, the average pay for the citizens of San Antonio.
Right, so it's a number established by the U.S. Census Bureau every 10 years. The last one was established 5 years ago. It's $45,722 a year, and that's the median household income of San Antonio.
Okay, and the mayor gets 35% bonus.
Correct, so just as is in the current arrangement, she would receive, or he would receive an additional amount.
And what would that amount be?
$61,725 a year.
Okay, so it's still not exactly a really high salary.
Sure, the thought process here was that we didn't want council to be a position where somebody got rich. We really wanted them to not be poor either. We wanted them to have enough to live on, and so we thought that was a fair number.
All right, Greg, what are your reasons for opposing it?
Well, let's be very clear so that the viewers know exactly what a council member is getting paid. And I think this is where it kind of starts with a little bit of our transparency issues here. They do get $20 a meeting. They also get $600 car allowance per month. They get $70 for a cell phone allowance per month. They get a $10,000 expense account fee for food and fuel. They get a free iPad and their free data plan every month. They get a parking pass that allows them to park anywhere downtown or in the city of San Antonio without having to pay a fee. So it's funny that David mentioned $23,000 or $25,000 to $30,000 in pay, because when you add all those benefits up, they're making about $23,000 to $24,000 worth of money. And that wasn't addressed in the Charter Commission process. Look, I'm an advocate of council pay, but I'm an advocate of doing it in the right way. So David and I have a banking background, and when we go out and we start a department or a new job or position, the first thing we do is talk about skills assessments and accountability. We don't throw a number at a job. We don't throw money at the job and say, hey, go make that worth $75,000 a year. No. We take a step back and we fix the job description. We make sure that the knowledge and skills are commensurate with the pay they're about to receive, and then I can hold those folks accountable here on the other end. The council and the Charter Commission did this exact opposite way. They came out and just put an arbitrary number out there from a median income, and then turned around and said, we're going to add that on top of the other money they're making. So it's not $46,000, it's really about $68,000 to $69,000 a year, and the mayor's going to be well over 80 grand. But I agree they should be paid. But if we're going to fix their job description, what we should have done was fix the city charter that was created back in 1951. So it was created to have a part-time council. And I don't agree with it that was what they're doing now. I come from the unique perspective of seeing it as a chief of staff, as a candidate, and working around these hardworking men and women. But the problem is we should have fixed the job description first, because now they're asking.
What do you mean by fix the job description?
We should have changed the city charter. We should drastically consider moving to a mayor-council form of government if possible, and putting the authority, the administrative authority, back on the city council. We pay the city manager $500,000 a year to do the exact same job the city council is now being asked to pay for. The city council wants to be able to perform more administrative duties and have more control over different things at City Hall. Well, we're paying the city manager to run that directly. If you go look at Houston,
that's an interesting philosophical question. Houston has a strong mayor who makes over $100,000 a year, if I recall.
Over $250,000.
$250,000. The council members make 60 something or so, somewhere in there. But the mayor has strong staff as well, which he gets to a point that are well paid. How do you respond? Would you be comfortable with going to a strong mayor? Do you think you have to do that in order to make this work?
No, I don't. I think the situation that we have and the way our form of government is just fine, but we need to acknowledge that it's a full-time job to be a city council person. I'd like to talk a little bit about the numbers that Greg just threw out, and since he's got a banking background and I have one too, my expense account is not a W-2 event. And so to suggest that there are lunches that are reimbursed as a part of their job, or their travel expense, that's a reimbursable expense as a part of them performing their duties. We live in an age of much more technology. I expect to be able to get a hold of my council person 24/7. So iPads and cell phones, the cell phone companies, the digital companies today have gone to more unlimited plans for a basic payment, and that's what we have at City Hall.
Right.
So I want access to my city councilman, and I think it's appropriate, but it's not appropriate to add all that up and say that's part of your personal compensation.
Right.
The number's $1,000, $1,040 a year. That's what they get.
Greg, you were quoted in the paper saying you just frankly didn't think this council deserved it. What did you mean by that?
Well, I've been able to watch it from the inside over many years.
So you worked for Ray Saldana.
I could tell you.
Does he not work hard enough to deserve?
Well, let's take Ray as an example.
Yeah.
Do I want to pay? So this is back to what I talked about at the beginning about paying for the proper work ethic, the proper work responsibilities and skill set. I don't want to pay Ray Saldana to go out and paint dumpsters. I don't want to pay Ray to visit the senior centers. That's why he has a paid and professional staff. The staff has, the city council member has almost $250,000 to divvy up that money as they see fit. So they have a professional staff that allows them the opportunity to go out and do that work. And it's never been, council pay has never been a roadblock to service. I mean, we have Ray as a perfect example. He's a Stanford graduate, a double bachelor's graduate. We have a Yale graduate, we have a cabinet secretary. So it wasn't about the money for a lot of these folks. What I think what the money does is it offers stability, and that's what the business community definitely wants. They want stability and common sense down at City Hall, and they want good leadership. But I go back to advocating again for, we don't even know what we're paying for at this point in time. I've been in there, so I can tell you their calendars are a bunch of meetings and things that don't really deserve compensation. That's what my comment meant.
Okay.
Well, and I think what really impressed me was all these meetings that they attend. They're doing due diligence on critical issues, complex issues for a $3 billion budget, City of San Antonio, the fifth largest.
Like approving a contract to buy water.
Absolutely. These are complex issues, and you can't just allow your staff, although they're very important.
We got just a little bit, I'm sorry, but I've got one quick question. My wife took a survey the other day, a phone survey. She said it sounded, you're always trying to figure out who's doing this, and it sounded really straight until she was asked about council pay, and they didn't tell how much. They said that it was by the percentage of increase, which is something like 4,000% increase because it's on $20. Mm-hmm. Do either of you know who might have been doing that survey?
No, I have no idea, but there's a lot of people. There's a lot of surveys in the field right now, and I think that's probably one of the hot topics of the day.
No, but I've heard that number, and it's an erroneous number. They make $1,040 a year. That's what they make.
Exactly. Well, that's what we have time for, and I thank you both very much, David McGee and Greg Brockhouse. Evan Smith, editor-in-chief of the Texas Tribune, joins us from Austin. Evan, there was one brief moment, 12 years or so ago, when there was pretty close to party parity, and we had the tension in Austin was between Democrats and Republicans. Not so anymore.
Right. Well, you hear a lot about House versus Senate tension as the defining theme of any legislative session, and the reality is it probably splits more along rural and urban lines than either by party or by chamber. But for all the predictions, and I made some myself at the beginning of the session, Rick, that this would be a kumbaya session with the House and the Senate on the same page on most issues. In fact, there are many key issues it turns out that the House and the Senate are not on the same page on. As we get down here to the dog days of May and approach sine die on June 1st, I do think that there are significant differences that may be unresolvable.
What do you think are the major ones?
Well, right now we have a fight over taxes going on, and that may be the most consumer-facing and visible fight. The Senate and the House both want to cut about $5 billion in taxes, a little bit less than $5 billion, and they both agree that the business tax should be cut, but the Senate wants to orchestrate a property tax cut. The House wants to orchestrate a sales tax cut. That may sound like a difference of degree, or it's maybe down in the weeds, but it's pretty significant, and they don't seem to like what each one doesn't like what the other side is doing, and I don't know that they're going to be able to come to some kind of an agreement without somebody outright winning and somebody outright losing. That's one disagreement. They disagree about the amount of money put into the budget for public education funding. The House puts in more than the Senate. They disagree on the border security funding. The Senate puts in more than the House. They disagree on the mechanism for putting about $4 or maybe even $5 billion in the end into transportation funding. The Senate wants to use the vehicle sales tax. The House wants to use the sales tax. And then on three issues that are fairly aggressively hot-button issues this session, two definite and one maybe. Definitely in-state tuition for undocumented students, definitely sanctuary cities, and maybe campus carry. The House and the Senate may not be ultimately in the same place, and none of those pieces of legislation, all of which sail through the Senate, are going to likely get through the House.
Now, in addition, Lieutenant Governor Patrick is really big on school choice, and a couple of different voucher programs appear to be going through the Senate, don't they?
Indeed, and they're calling it's vouchers by another name. They're calling it scholarships. They're calling it school choice even more broadly. Last session, the House, in the course of passing a budget, voted down an amendment, or voted for an amendment, I should say, that ultimately crippled any attempt to get vouchers or anything like vouchers through the House. There was no such amendment this time during the budget fight, but it is generally believed to be the case that the House is not disposed to vouchers any more this time than last time. In the end, Rick, we're only going to know when we know. The Senate is trying to get creative about recasting this voucher thing as something else. It's kind of same old thing in a brand new box. But we're going to find out in the end on whether the House ultimately says no to school choice. I think that it's there's a lot more stuff that they're disagreeing on than I would have predicted. And I think House will win some, Senate will win some. And it remains to be seen whether Texas wins in the end. It's fun for the press, though. We like it when they're fighting. I know you like it. I like it. So take some small comfort in that.
Is there any one or two areas there where it's clear that the governor would call a special session if the House and Senate can't agree?
I think that's a good question. He could call a special session over school choice, although I'm not sure that he will. He would certainly call a special session over transportation funding if they didn't get on the same page, and I suspect they will before it comes to that. He said he wants to sign open carry legislation. House going to get open carry passed. He hasn't said that he is aggressively for campus carry. He'd sign it, but I'm not sure that if campus carry didn't pass the House, he'd call a special session. Remains to be seen. Still a lot of time left, Rick.
Okay. Thank you, Evan. We've set up a link to the Texas Tribune website. Just go to klrn.org/TexasWeek. Here's something we're very excited about. This week, Texas A&M International University in Laredo held dedication ceremonies for the TAMIU KLRN studio. The new studio provides us with TV production capabilities and will provide learning opportunities for future production and journalism students in Laredo. It also provides us with a previously unavailable uplink capacity that will help us to better explore and discuss issues taking place along the border. The new studio was made possible through the generosity of many underwriters whose names you'll see in our closing credits.
We'd like to hear from you. Email us at texasweek@klrn.org. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And now, the last word with Rick Casey.
Here's a headline for you. Class warfare breaks out in the Texas legislature. Well, okay, warfare may be a bit of a stretch. Class skirmish might be better only because the stakes aren't very high. And it's not between Democrats and Republicans. It's between Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick's Senate and Speaker Joe Straus's House. Both are overwhelmingly Republican, and both are committed to cut Texas taxes by billions of dollars. But the House and the Senate are arm wrestling over who should get the tax cuts. The Senate wants to give property tax breaks to homeowners by raising the homestead exemption on school taxes. The state would then reimburse the school districts for what they lose. The amount of tax relief per owner would be about $200 a year. For most homeowners, that would mean lowering their monthly mortgage bill by about $17. I told you the stakes weren't very high. One advantage for homeowners, unlike the current homestead exemption, the new law would index the amount to the statewide median value of a home. So the value of the tax cut would go up with inflation. But for the more than 4.5 million renters in Texas, this tax cut would be meaningless. Rental houses and apartments don't qualify as homesteads, so there is no tax cut for landlords to pass on to tenants. About 1 in 6 Texans would get nothing under the Senate plan. The House plan, crafted by Ways and Means Chairman Dennis Bonnen of Angleton and backed by Speaker Straus, leaves no taxpayer out, not homeowners, not renters, not illegal aliens, or even Easter time visitors from Mexico. Instead of cutting some property taxes, Bonnen would cut the tax nobody in Texas escapes, the sales tax. Again, the tax cut would not be huge. The state sales tax would drop from 6.25% all the way to 5.95%. For the average family of 4, the reduction would be about $172 a year. But everyone would get something. And like the proposed Senate cut, it is linked to inflation since it would grow as prices go up. So which tax proposal is better? Politically speaking, it's clearly the Senate plan. As Senate Finance Committee Chair Jane Nelson said, "I have never had a constituent tell me they want a cut in sales tax, ever. I've had a lot of constituents come and complain about property taxes. What's more, those apartment dwellers who won't get anything from the Senate plan, they don't vote near the numbers homeowners do. But if the Senate plan is better politics, the House plan is better policy. Not long ago, as the legislature began to rally around the notion of tax cuts, I noted that Texans already rank third from the bottom nationally in the amount of state and local taxes we pay. But we also rank third from the bottom in how regressive our taxes are. That's a fancy way of saying we put a heavier burden on those who can least afford it. According to figures from the State Comptroller's Office compiled by the Austin-based Center for Public Policy Priorities, the poorest 20% of Texans pay 18% of their income to state and local taxes. The richest 20%, they pay slightly less than 5%. The fact that Texas relies heavily on a sales tax to make up for not having a state income tax is a major cause of this fairness gap. Only Washington State and Florida have larger gaps. The minuscule cut in the sales tax would hardly make a dent, and we would probably all be better off if the tax savings were used for better schools and, say, broader access to health care. But if the choice is between these two virtually symbolic tax cuts, the House version is better. And that's it for Texas Week. See you next time.
Texas Week with Rick Casey is made possible by the generous support of the William and Salome Scanlon Foundation, supporting educational, environmental, and Hispanic cultural initiatives. The John and Florence Newman Foundation, encouraging an informed community. The Daniel J. Sullivan Family Foundation, and visionaries like members of KLRN.